Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Rock Pile here tonight. I'm happy to be back with you live here on a Wednesday evening here. College basketball, we get to the Final Four this week. We'll talk some Final Four women's basketball as well. I'm going to bring on my guest here in just a little bit. I want to make sure that I give him a special thank you. I've been hounding him on social media to come on with me to take some time, and I'm excited to talk to the host of Full Ride, also the host of Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. I want to talk to Chris about that and more. The show pony, Chris Childers, you can listen to him and Coach Neuheisel weekdays in the mornings. We're going to talk. He's on channel 84, SiriusXM College Sports Radio. So let's bring Chris on now. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you. As I was telling everybody and you before we came on, I've been hounding you, man. I'm like, I got to get the show pony on. He's been awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be on. It's been a crazy couple of weeks with the tournament, and what's been kind of cool is that I feel the job has been a little bit more demanding this year, and I've been doing it for a while, since like 05, because the women's tournament really has commanded the attention that I'm really glad that it's getting. But it deserves full coverage. So we did a ton of women's basketball the last couple of days, and it's made it even a little bit more crazy, but it's been a lot of fun.
So, Chris, I'm going to jump around with you a little bit, but you mentioned the girls thing, and one of the things, I mean, I followed the Caitlin Clark story like all of us, but I'm a huge Paige fan, and I kind of feel like people have put her on the back burner because she had the injury in the last couple years. She's back. She played sensational in that regional game to go to the Final Four. But has she been kind of on the back burner because of all the hype with Caitlin Clark? I'm not taking anything away from Caitlin Clark, but Paige has been the face of women's basketball in my eyes for a long
She's
time.
got a chance to prove that on Friday night, and I think that's kind of the neat thing about this matchup between Caitlin and Paige. Paige Beckers, we've been covering her for years, and I'm, truth be told, a big women's basketball fan, and I have been for a long time, way before it got this cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been preaching about it for a long time, and I've known about Paige for a while. When she was in high school, she was supposed to be Caitlin Clark. She was supposed to be the biggest thing that we've ever seen, and this ultra-talented player. The problem was she got hurt. Yeah. She was injured, and she was battling all these ailments. She's fine now. She's healthy. She is recharged. And I think what you're going to see on Friday night is just a battle for the ages between two generational players. I think Paige's star will rise this weekend. It only can go up, and I think it will when she engages one-on-one with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin kind of makes everybody around her more famous, and if you become a nemesis and a worthy adversary at that, like Angel Reese was this year and last year, it's going to only make it that much more popular. That's the Caitlin Clark effect. So I love Paige. I think Paige has kind of a Tim Tebow-esque vibe to her with her message about faith and all the things that she says. That's going to make her really popular in a lot of circles, and I think a lot of people will be drawn to somebody like her, and that can only help women's basketball. It can only help the popularity of it. And the good news is it's not just her. Next year we have Juju Smith as a sophomore. We've got Heina Hidalgo as a sophomore. I think we're just starting with the greatness of what we're going to see from these individual players. So I think women's basketball is so strong because they have all these stars. It is not just a UConn kicking everybody's butt kind of world anymore. And we have legitimate parity and legitimate stars at different schools. And it's created this perfect storm that's led by Caitlin Clark, who's an absolute freak show. And I say that in the greatest of terms. I was telling my buddy the other day, I was like, everybody goes on and on about how she shoots from the parking lot. And I get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the draw. But to me, the most amazing thing she does is those outlet passes in transition, when she gets the rebound and she can hit somebody in stride down the court, and she does it it's like Brett Favre-esque. It really is incredible. To me, she plays the game like Brett Favre played quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
She's incredible. So it's really cool seeing what's going on with women's basketball, and we feel it. I mean, we're feeling it from a coverage standpoint, and we get a demand for people, from people to talk about it.
When I saw Iowa's draw, I said, I don't think there's any way they get there because I thought the draw that they had with, Caitlin to have to go through a gauntlet to get to
Yeah.
the Final Four again. And I think you hit it right on the button. She makes everybody better. But going back to the Connecticut thing, because I think obviously Gino Auriemma was the face, his team was the face of women's basketball for a long time. I think the job he's done this year with what, 4 or 5 players out for health reasons, injuries. You get Paige back this year. They're not very deep. I think he's done one of his best coaching jobs this season. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is kind of a reinvention of Gino. Gino hasn't been ever since they got beat in that semifinal game by Mississippi State and Vic Schaefer when he was with the Bulldogs. Things have not been the way they were. UConn was this dominant, mow everybody over, beat everybody down. Everybody was like a sacrificial lamb. The year before Mississippi State beat them, I think they beat Mississippi State in the second round of the tournament by 60. If that gives you an idea of where things were. We've evolved to a point where there's so much more parity. Dawn Staley has built up her program in a big way. I think it's a direct result of all these conference networks that have, really pumped money into the women's side of things. And women's basketball has been a huge beneficiary of it. And I think now you're seeing an investment into these women. But I think this is kind of a, reestablishing Gino as a king, because a lot of people, were saying, well, Gino was only great when he had the huge advantage from a recruiting standpoint and he just had better talent. And I think this year he's coaching his butt off. I think he is proving that he absolutely is worthy of winning another national title. And I will say this, I think the next one he wins, if it happens this year or whenever, if he wins another one, I actually think it'll be the most impressive one he ever wins, because he didn't have the stockpile of the Diana Taurasi's and, players like that from years gone by, the Breanna Stewarts of the world. That's not what he's working. I mean, Paige Beckers is a freak, but there's other freaks. It's not just them with the freaks. And freak, I say that in the greatest of athletic terms, so don't get it misconstrued. But I think he's coaching his butt off. To your point, I really do.
When I watched that LSU game the other night, the first thing I said, and I mean, listen, I'm nowhere near I'm a high school football coach and a youth basketball coach with my son, but I was really surprised that they didn't try to take the ball out of Caitlin Clark's hands. I was surprised they didn't double her as soon as she crossed half court. I was just surprised that they didn't defend. Now, there's probably no way to defend her. You can't stop her. You got to hope somebody else beats you. But she's so good with the ball. She's so good in transition. Yeah. Were you surprised that they didn't defend her a different way or try different things?
Yeah, I was, but then I wasn't, because here's the thing, and it goes back to what I said a minute ago about the outlet pass. Her vision is so incredible. It's not like she's got a really ultra talented group around her, but they're good enough. They're a solid basketball team without Caitlin Clark. They're not a good one. They're not a great one, but they're solid. But solid's good enough if you're going to put so much attention on Caitlin. And here's the thing, if she was just a shooter, if she was just an offensive weapon that could create for herself, then okay, double, triple team, or do whatever the hell you got to do. The problem is that her vision is so impeccable that she's so good at hitting the open player. And I think Iowa's more than capable of making everybody pay. So that to me is the problem. If you try to double, triple her, it's her almost Steve Nash kind of ability to distribute the basketball. If you remember Nash, who played for the Suns and the Mavericks, he was my favorite player to ever watch in person. And I'm a Bulls fan. And I grew up going to, see Michael Jordan many times a year as a kid. But Steve Nash was this dude that it was almost like watching a magician with the basketball. And I feel like Caitlin's got a lot of that in her. And I think that's what makes it such a problem for when a coach tries to defend her, is that if you do apply, more of your roster to her, she's got such an ability, she'll get 20 something assists and just pick you apart. So I think that's the problem. Now, with that said, I'd probably still take that risk, because I'd rather have those other girls have the pressure and just take Caitlin out. Just, put three bodies on her and just let everybody else prove they can take you out.
Some radio and TV people that I've listened to have said, if Caitlin played on some of those good Tennessee teams when Pat Summitt was around and had better talent around her. She probably would have won more championships. And some say, well, she's not the greatest of all time. Is she the greatest shooter we've seen in the women's game, or is she the best women's player that we've ever seen? Because a lot of arguments could be made.
I think time will tell. I think she's the greatest of all time. And here's why. Going back to what we just said, and you're going to have like Rebecca Lobo say she can't be the GOAT until she wins championships, or Jay Williams who made the comments, but I just don't see it that way because, like I said, Iowa is solid around her, but they're not great. LSU is a great team. Haley Van Lith is an exceptional player. Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, Morrow. That's a loaded basketball team. UConn, a loaded basketball team. South Carolina, loaded basketball team. Iowa is 22. It's Caitlin. She's the team. She's the show. And the thing about it is, and here's why, and she actually cemented herself as the greatest player of all time, in my opinion, to play women's basketball on Monday night. And here's why. For her to do it, the Big Ten is one thing, but the Big Ten's, it's okay. It's good, but it's not, the elite basketball. It's got some good teams, Ohio State, etc. But to me, you're playing the reigning defending champions that added Haley Van Lith with Angel Reese. That is a roster that is loaded. That is a deep and talented Kim Mulkey coached and Kim Mulkey developed roster. And Caitlin lit them up like a Christmas tree. And I know there's some people that wonder, is she athletic enough to get her shot off in the WNBA? If you can do it at this level in college and you can literally will your team to the Final Four 2 years in a row by yourself, you're a freak. I mean, you're special beyond special. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. She doesn't, excuse me, like growing up in Chicago, I love seeing Michael Jordan, but Michael Jordan had a Robin to his Batman. He had Scottie Pippen, who is one of the top 50 players to ever play the game. Caitlin doesn't have Robin. Caitlin is the whole show. She's Superwoman and then some. And they're back in the Final Four. And they got through LSU in a murderous bracket to get there. So I think she's confirmed without a shadow of a doubt this tournament that she's the greatest of all time, regardless of what happens on Friday. And regardless, because I don't think they're going to win the title. I think these other teams are too good. Teams, not players. Teams.
I agree.
And South Carolina, I expect to go 38-0. Now, maybe they won't. Maybe UConn wins it because UConn's more than capable. But she might not win in Cleveland. I think for ESPN's sake, they would love to have her playing in the championship. But either way, I think, what she's done is proven her valor because she's literally by herself gotten these teams to this point. And I got to tell you, this is the second show that I've done today where we have talked so much women's basketball. And I'm so thrilled. Like, I love it. I have been fighting for this for the longest time. And it's almost like a fantasy. Like, I got to pinch myself. This is awesome. And to me, this just proves to you that what will happen if you invest in women. I feel like for the longest time, we haven't given them their due diligence. We haven't given them equal opportunity, whether it's sports or music or politics or whatever the hell it is. But I got to tell you, I mean, I live with 2 women and 2 more dogs. So I've got 4 women in my household, right? I got 4 girls. I'm the dumbest one of them all. I mean, believe me, they're smart, they're savvy, they have empathy. I think if you invest in maybe, and that's what it's been all these years, is people just scared of what would happen if we actually put some resources. But I am thrilled to see what's going on with women's sports in general. But really, this boom with women's basketball is really, really awesome.
Yeah, and I don't think, but I know the ratings from the women's Final Four. We'll see here with the men's Final Four. I'd almost guarantee you the ratings will be better for the women's.
Totally.
But the question I have is, so you have all these big names still in the women's game. When Caitlin Clark goes to the WNBA, or let's say she goes and plays in the Big Three for the $5 million that she's going to have a choice, you're still going to have Paige. You're still going to have some young stars in the college game. Will we see the college women's game take a step back without the Caitlin Clarks, the Angel Reeses?
It's an interesting question. And I think A little, because Caitlin has drawn in people that would never watch women's basketball. I've had a lot of people tell me they tune in Monday night just to see what the hype was about, and it
Yeah.
delivered. So, I think that helps the game. It certainly shows what's possible, and I think it's going to create a new level of fan and a new generation of fan base, and it's going to create dreams for little girls, and they're going to see what's possible on that stage. Do I think that maybe there's a little bit of a step back? Sure. Caitlin, that's going to be the WNBA's game, though. I mean, Caitlin's going to go and play for the Indiana Fever and, in my opinion, go on to have a legendary career as long as she stays healthy. But Paige is not leaving. And Hannah Hidalgo is a freshman.
Yeah.
And Malaysia Fulwiley is young. And Juju Watkins is young. So to me, the next generation is really very just kind of scratching the surface as to what they can be. So I don't really think it's going to be that big. I think women's basketball is here to stay. I think women's athletics is here to stay. And another reason why I would say that, why it's more than Caitlin, look at the tournament this year. We have UConn as a 3 seed.
Mm-hmm.
If that, and LSU was a 3, and NC State, who's in the Final Four as well, as a 3. Back in the day, man, like 5 years ago, it would be all ones.
Absolutely.
It would be all ones, and nobody else would even have a fighter's chance. We've changed that. And that, to me, comes back to the investment into resources into women's sports. So I think we're in a great spot. I really do. And I think, certainly Caitlin is generational, but I think people have figured out that women's sports they're good. Like, the games are good, whether she's playing or not.
So, Chris, I want to jump around a little bit with you because I want to dive in. I got a few football things for you, but I want to talk to you ask you a little bit about your career. Middle Tennessee State grad. I know you're a proud alum there. You're doing some grad work now at Alabama. How did you get into the radio side? I know you did some TV for Middle Tennessee. Where'd the radio come from?
Fluke. It was a fluke. I always thought I was going to do television. I did TV. When I was young, I was in 6th grade, and there was a tryout at our elementary school in Chicagoland for the little TV show they did on public access TV on Channel 4 called Eagle Vision. We're the Hawthorne Eagles. And, you could try out and do a little segment. And I tried out and got the sports thing and, started my own thing. And we did a little segment called the Irish Review, where we talked about Notre Dame football every week on the suburban Chicago public access show. And I was like 11 years old. And I just kind of got into it because we were going to Notre Dame to go to spring ball and interviewing players and coaches. And they got a kick out of talking to me. And it was, pretty cool that, they would come up and let me interview them. We got into the Bears locker room at Hallis Hall and got to talk to Chris Zorich, who played for Notre Dame.
Yep.
And Dave Wannstedt, who was the head coach at the time. So we did some fun things that I think growing up in that area, and especially growing up so close to the Bears training facility, and the Bears were so integrated in our community. We would see them all the time. We would bowl with them at the, Hawthorne Lanes. We would see them at restaurants. A lot of times, I'd be out at my buddy's Rich's house, and Steve Walsh would come and play catch with us on the street when he was playing for the Bears. So it was pretty cool. And so we got access. It was, just being a little kid with a high pitched voice. And we, I just asked the guys, hey, can I put you on my little TV show? And so I think that's what got me really to love it. I'm not very athletic and not very tall or fast. So I knew that to be in sports, this was going to be the way. And I recognized that at a pretty young age. And I did it in high school. I went to Libertyville, which had this incredible TV program that was taught by a guy, Don Johnson, who was a old sports anchor for ESPN and did Fox. And he was my mentor growing up, just an incredible guy. And so in college, I just kind of had all this on air experience already. I went to Middle Tennessee, and I had already done all kinds of TV. And I really thought TV was it. And I was the news director for the Middle Tennessee News. I was an anchor for the Middle Tennessee News. I absolutely thought that's what I was going to do. And then I was applying for internships, and I applied for a bunch of them in Chicago, and I got rejected for all of them, whether it was NBC5 or WGN or whatever. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I went to Middle Tennessee and I was applying for internships in Chicago. Truth be told, I think I really do. But Sporting News Radio was in Northbrook, Illinois, right down the road with James Brown and Tim Brando and all these guys. And I applied there. And I also applied to my favorite radio station ever, 670 The Score, and got rejected. And WGN Radio got rejected. ESPN Radio 1000 got rejected. But Sporting News took me. So there was my internship. I had an internship in Chicago. I didn't want to do one in Nashville, which is where my school was located near, which is where I live now. But I wanted to do it back home so I could do it in the summer and live with my mom and dad. So Sporting News Radio it was. And it just kind of went from there. Then I was a radio guy. I was doing radio things and I knew radio people. And so now I had experience. And when a job opened up with Rivals Radio back in 2005, I didn't hesitate. I had applied for a news anchor job in Montgomery, Alabama, and they had offered me the job. And then I also had a offer for Rivals, and both of them didn't pay anything. Well, the jingle, yeah, Sporting News Radio. Yep. I saw that in the chat there, but I did just kind of fell in love with it, and fell in love with the medium, and for me, I'm a very kind of creative person. And TV felt a little bit too constructive and too kind of in, a lane, and radio lets me be kind of nuts. So, I love it. I like to say that I play my 13-year-old self every morning on the radio. And that's fun. That's fun to do. And I get to do it for 3 hours every day, but that's how I got into it.
Chris, that's so funny because I'm a Fordham grad. I played football, graduated from Fordham. So a lot of Fordham guys, are in broadcasting. There's a lot of Fordham and Syracuse alum, but people always ask me like TV versus radio. And I've always said, I love doing radio. I think radio, you can be you can be crazy. Not that you can say what you want, but I felt like TV was scripted, right? You had to be a certain way. So it's interesting that you say that because I do agree with you. I was stubborn out of college because I was a football guy, played for Dave Clawson, who's the Wake Forest coach. And I was doing some radio out there, but I was young and foolish and said, I want to go make the big bucks. But radio, as you know, when you get started, it doesn't pay anything.
No.
Right?
Dude, I made $22,500 at the beginning of my career, to give you an idea. Yeah.
So I love radio. I've only done it for about 9 years. I do it at a small local station here on weekends as my fun job.
Sure.
My full-time job doesn't allow me to do it, but I always say someday I want to get back, and I'd love to be able to do it for a living. And you make it fun. I love listening to you guys.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about how'd you get involved with Full Ride with Coach Neuheisel, who, by the way, I was pulling that he'd get the Middle Tennessee State job. And then I was pulling for him to get back into coaching, period. I want to see him back on the sidelines.
He wasn't too far from getting that job at MTSU. It was we had to be quiet about everything, and he still gets pissed that I bring it up and that he interviewed. But I guess I let the cat out of the bag one day on the air. But he had like a final interview and everything at the SEC championship game, and I was really excited. Not that I wanted to lose him as a co-host, but I would have. Come on, I would have been there all the time and hanging out at my alma mater, and it would have been like I owned the team pretty much. It would have been pretty sweet just to be around and have all the access that I would have had at my favorite team, my favorite school. So it's a bummer, but I got involved with Full Ride. So here's the thing. I was doing Rivals Radio, and Rivals had a contract with Sirius Radio before the merger, and then it became SiriusXM. But there was a guy working with us named Bill King who left Rivals and signed with 24/7 Sports, and then they launched a radio show, and it got kind of weird. Rivals was essentially getting phased out. Essentially, when the contract ran up, what was left of it, which was me and a guy named Jason Ogg. We were going to be, left on our butt. So the good thing is that I was working on a weekend shift for SiriusXM at the time. And I had a really good relationship with the boss at the time, Matt Fishman, who is the program director, who now is a program director in Columbus, Ohio for the big sports station there. But Matt called me one day when the contract was getting ready to expire and said that they weren't going to renew, but he said that they were thinking about staying in business with me and having me as an employee for Sirius, but they weren't sure how or why or what the budget was going to look like or if they could get it done. So essentially what happened is that when the contract expired, the guy who was with Rivals at the time called me and said, hey, we're going to, speaking of Sporting News Radio, which is weird, it became Yahoo Sports Radio after the years, and Yahoo acquired it. And Yahoo, which is the one who owned Rivals and owns Rivals, they were going to start a overnight radio show, Rivals Radio, on Yahoo Sports. And so they said, well, now that our contract's up, we're going to offer you this position to do the overnights, or you're going to get laid off. It's one of the, it's either you take the job or you're going to get laid off. So I actually, leap of faith, took the laid off route. Banking, because I didn't like Yahoo Sports Radio. I didn't feel right about it. To me, it always kind of felt a little less than, no offense, but it just didn't feel like it was going to get me where I wanted to go. And Sirius felt very exciting. But I didn't know if I was going to be able to work for Sirius outside of the weekends. Luckily, 2 days later, they offered me a full-time position. And I started doing the night shift. It was called College Sports Coast to Coast. It was like the, dinner shift, like 6 to 9, I think I did. And then I did weekends. I did, like post game and stuff like that. And I had some great co-hosts over the years, Bruce Pearl and Mike Leach, and, really cool people. But then Tim Brando his contract was up and they weren't going to renew with Tim. I think Tim was retiring or something. And so they offered me the job. I guess they thought that I was ready and I was cheap enough, where I wasn't going to ask for a big salary. And so they put me in that position and they were going to kind of rotate some co-hosts. And Neuheisel said, hey, I want to not just be one of the guys. I want to be, like the guy. And he told Steve Cohen, our boss at SiriusXM, that he wanted to work with me, which I think he probably regrets every day, but he did. He will admit it. He said that he made this happen. And then we were a partnership. And then I think they named it Full Ride. They just told us this is the name of the show. And okay, I like it. It's cool. And we've gone with it since. So we've been together, I think, a decade. I think it's coming up. The weird thing is we can never figure out when we started. And we've talked about it God knows how many times, but we don't know. I think it's 10 years. I'm pretty sure.
It does seem like you guys have, and I know a lot of different stations have different chemistries. A lot, depends on the co-host. You have Allie that works with you on that show, and she's awesome too. And you guys all just seem like you fit together and you have fun. How much prep goes into that for each show for you? Like, when do you prep? Do you prep at night, being your shows in the morning? You get in early and get your notes ready. How much prep goes in?
I'm afraid to admit this.
You wake up and you talk sports.
Yeah. That's kind of what happens. So let me be very clear. I used to be a prepaholic. I would watch games on Saturdays and I would have like a notebook, like one of those, school notebooks, and I would fill the thing up. I mean, I wrote countless notes and game by game and almost like looked at it and memorized it through the week and really put a lot of effort into that, studied statistics, did all that kind of stuff. But honestly, I've been doing it so long that there's nothing. So here's what we do. Allie puts together a rundown and it's kind of a loose here's what we're doing for the day. So like today, I think she planned for us to talk women's basketball in the first segment, which didn't happen, but we ended up getting to it. But it kind of gives me some ideas. She'll kind of list out some options for get yourself together.
Yep.
I don't know if this is, I swear to you, this is the truth, but Rick and I don't know if you like Get Yourself Together or not, or if you think it's funny, but I know a lot of people
It
that
is.
do. This is how unorganized I am and Rick is. We will literally before the segment figure out what we're gonna do. I will be like, what should I do? And then I'll think of something, and then Rick's like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do so I don't step over you? And I'm like, that happens right before we go on and do the segment. I don't think Rick does any. I don't even think he reads the rundown, but I read it every morning. That's what I do. I'll wake up and I'll read the rundown like I'm reading the newspaper, see who we have on from a guest perspective. But more times than not, I watch the games. I've been doing this so long that now, to be fair, it's not really true anymore, but I've been doing it so long where everything was always, things are always the same. It's just the players that are different.
Yeah.
But the games are the same. Everything, there's a rhythm to the college sports season. And if you do it long enough, you kind of understand that rhythm and don't really need to hyper obsess about studying it. But with that said, that's going to change. July 1st, we're going to have completely different looking college sports. So I'm going to have to work harder. So I'm going to have to start doing some preparation work again. And not that we go through the motions in any way, but I think we've just done enough of it. Like everything you hear is organic. Every single thing that Allie plays, nothing is planned. No bit is planned. No song that ends up getting played over and over again is planned. No drop. It all happens where it literally and there's a lot of times in the first segment where I will kind of laugh when we go to break because I'll intend on talking about something and we just never do it. Because Rick a lot of times will just I'll say something and then I don't want to say hijacks, but in certain terms he hijacks the segment and
he goes.
Yep. And then there we are. Like we're on that path and we've completely gone on a different highway. So that's full ride. I hope it doesn't disappoint anybody, but and again, I used to really put a lot of effort into it, but it got to a point where I was like, I don't think I need to anymore because I kind of know what's going on in this world. But again, that's going to change when all this realignment actually happens and the playoff expands, and it's going to be kind of relearning it all again.
So I'm a little surprised at Coach because I would think most us coaches are scripted. And I know you got to be ready to get off script and this and that. Even for tonight, I had so much stuff on my screen on my little notes, and I won't get to half of it, which is fine. That's what makes fun conversations. But I would have thought Coach would have had his notes. He's checking stuff off. I would have never thought that at all about him.
Not even a little bit of that. He doesn't, he doesn't even open the rundown. So he doesn't. Every segment to him is a surprise.
That's awesome.
Everyone.
I would have never.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you mentioned a couple guys that you co-hosted with, and one of them hits home for me because I think when Mike Leach passed away, I think I reached out to you because you guys were doing a whole segment on Mike Leach, and I have the Mike Leach shirt. Was a Mike Leach fan my whole life. Huge Mike Leach fan. How much did he mean to you? And just talk a little bit about Mike Leach.
He meant a lot. He was the most unique human being, genuinely, that I ever worked with. He was odd. He was strange, and it was beautiful, and because it was so authentic. It was so Mike. There's a picture that's up on my wall of me and him sitting together in Arizona. We were in where were we at the time? Scottsdale. We were at the Camelback Inn, the Marriott Camelback there. We were doing radio shows for the Auburn and Oregon national championship game. And him and I were partners together that week. And so we got to spend a lot of time together that week. And we actually went hiking together. And that was wild, going up a mountain with him. And he's just like, he's the most interesting man in the world.
He
So
is.
the things that he talks about are fascinating. I think he's the most successful football coach that really didn't give a rat's butt about football. He was so interested in everything else. He was interested in, how things worked and history, and football was like 5 plays that he ran over and over and over again, and was able to have a hell of a career doing it. Neuheisel would go to his practices and be like, I can't believe this. The rest of us are like up all night studying film, and this guy just 5 plays, and we're going to do it over and over, and we're going to have variations of the 5 plays, but we're going to have, like, football to him was on a note card.
Yeah.
It was a 3x5 card. That was football. My favorite story that I love to tell, because it so encapsulates Mike. So Mike and I were doing a post-game show. We were doing, I think it was after, in fact, I know it was after an Alabama LSU game. So, and this was like Les Miles, LSU, big game. I think it might have been the one that led up to the time they played in the national title, where it was like 6-3 or 9-6 or something like that. But I remember there was a big play, and back then I used to take phone calls. I don't take phone calls anymore, but back then I did. Excuse me. And so I took a call from somebody who had asked about something that had happened in the Alabama LSU game, and it was something important. It was like fourth quarter, I think it was under review, knee being down. I mean, something big, something important. And Mike literally gets on with this caller and says, I have no idea. I was fishing. And I'm just like, well, this is going to be a wonderful show the rest of the day, because you didn't watch anything. And you're my analyst. I'm supposed to be looking to you for, for these little, grains of knowledge and wisdom. And he didn't watch a damn thing. This is true as well. We would go to commercial break. If he was doing a show during the daytime and it was hot, he would do the show on his deck in Key West, right? So he would be in Key West, and he had this house, and he would do it on the deck. And you'd hear like the birds chirping in the back, like you'd always hear like all the sounds of Key West happening on the radio. But we'd go to commercial break, and you would just hear like a splash. And it's like he would jump in the pool. He would jump in the pool for like 2-3 minutes and, swim a lap or two, and then he'd come out and get dried off and get right back on the radio. There'd be other times where I would, come back from a commercial break and, throw it to Coach Leach, and he would be legitimately out of breath. And it was because he was doing push-ups and sit-ups during the commercial break. He was and he loved the fact that I played ukulele. And so, and I think I have his book. Yeah, I see it right there. I have his book down there that he sent me, Swing Your Sword. And I think it has something inscribed about the ukulele in there. It's something he always, every time he would ask me if I was still playing it. And he'd always have me play something for him, even when we'd get him on when he was a coach, when he was there at Mississippi State or Washington State before it. So truly, truly unique, truly one of a kind. And it was really awful. Like, I just remember watching him in that Egg Bowl and how incredible it was. I see Mike in the chat bring up the Halloween candy. That was Mike in a nutshell. That was one of Alyssa Lang's a friend of mine who works for the SEC Network and also works for us at SiriusXM. And that was one of Alyssa's favorite things, was to get him to talk about nonsense. I mean, just, not even ever ask him about football, but get him to talk about Halloween candy or marriage advice or things that Mike actually had opinions on. He didn't care about the football team or what was going on at the end of the fourth quarter, but he would give you a whole soliloquy on gummy nerds and how great of an invention they were. I mean, that was Mike in a nutshell.
Do you think today, if he was still alive today, would he still be at Mississippi State, or you think he'd be at a bigger job?
I think he'd still be at Mississippi State. I think he loved it there. I think he was really comfortable in not an outpost job per se. It's an SEC job, but it's still one of those kind of middle of nowhere. You don't just kind of happen upon Starkville. You got to be going there kind of things. And I think he always excelled. I think from a just personality perspective, he actually fit in really well, even though he's not Southern. I think a lot of his ideologies, excuse me, I got a tickle, fit in quite well with that group. So I think, as long as he would have been adapting, and the interesting thing is, all this NIL and transfer portal stuff has become all the rage. So how would he have dealt with that? God
Right.
knows. I mean, God knows how he would have, handled kids leaving, and because that was kind of right at the end of his career and his life when all that was, really getting to become the rage. But I don't know how he would have handled that, whether if he would have said, screw it, I'm not doing this. I mean, he might have quit. He might have been like, Nick Saban and said, I'm good. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Well, that was my next question for you. So you must see my notes behind here is when the football season got ended, I'm a Big Ten guy, and I know you were on a podcast. I think the first week, week 0, you were on a podcast with some Big Ten guys, and they were asking a little bit about Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan team and so forth. But towards the end of the season, the way Alabama lost that game to Michigan, there's no way if you would have told me Nick Saban was going to announce he was retiring, I would have said, no way he goes out that way. And we're talking about recruiting in the NIL. Back in the day, if you were a 5-star high school recruit and you were good enough to play, you went to Alabama. But now, do you think that is the main reason why Coach ended up retiring because of the NIL and the way the
Yes.
portal and all that is today?
Yeah, I think he waved the white flag. He realized he could not be himself anymore. What made Saban great, that was taken out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's about NIL deals and the kids literally, what can I get and what's my playing time going to look like? It's become more NFL than ever before, but with no salary cap, with no, restriction, with guys that can leave and go into free agency. And so it's like NFL, anarchy really is what it's become. And I think he saw that and said, I can't be Alabama. I can't meet my expectation in this world. So I'm done. I'm good. I ran my race. Yeah, we lost to Michigan. We got close, but I don't know if I'm going to get close to Michigan anymore. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can sleep well at night with what college sports has become. And that's him. That's a guy of a certain age that did it a certain way for as long as he did. And then it changed. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different profession than it was 2-3 years ago. And Nick Saban realized that the same way Mike Krzyzewski did.
Yeah.
Same way Roy Williams and Jay Wright and all these guys are like, look, we had a method that worked, but the game evolved really beyond them. And so they had success. Their legacies are intact, and they could have a clean dismount. And I think Nick had about as clean. It was shocking. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But as far as dismounts go in this world, it was a pretty good one for him.
What'd you think of the Kalen DeBoer hire?
We'll
Oh,
see.
yeah.
It's one of those, it looks good on paper. I mean, and why I like him, I like coaches that win at every level they coach in. I like guys that can win at, North Dakota, A&T, and, places like UW Platteville, and, like Lance Leipold is that kind of guy at Kansas who he just wins. He's just
Love him. One of my favorites.
Me too. He's a good friend of mine. That is Kalen. Kalen's of that same cut of cloth. So to me, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's just a real hard preposition to replace Nick, especially because I don't think Alabama, excuse me. I don't think Alabama has the collective that other teams do. I think there's only so much money in the state of Alabama, not to say there's not successful businesses, but
Mm-hmm.
like the state of Texas is going to have, oil money. They're going to have these resources, these riches that I just don't know if Alabama, and this might sound crazy, but I think that's our reality. I don't know if they can keep up. I think they'll be competitive, but I don't know if they're going to have the same sort of collective resources as some of these other schools.
Big Ten question for you here. Then I just want to jump around a couple spots here, and then I feel like I can talk college football and basketball with you here for 3 hours, but I know you got better things to do than sit and talk to me here for a while. You've been talking all day. Ryan Day. So I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm more of a Michigan guy, and I think the season they had was obviously a great season. And I had said before the season started, I thought Jim Harbaugh, win or lose, would go to the NFL because I thought it was the right time. You know, you don't know what the NCAA was going to do with Harbaugh, but the pressure with Ryan Day losing for a third time to Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, and right now on paper, what Ohio State's done in the transfer portal, it's like they have an all-star team put together that where if they don't beat Michigan this year, get to that playoff, which they should, right? 12 teams. Is there the expectations for Ryan Day this year even more tougher than what they were last year if he loses again to Michigan and doesn't get to maybe the national title game?
I mean, yeah, but I don't think he will. And the good news is now the 12-team playoff kind of gives you a mulligan anyways if you get beat. So I think it changes the perspective of what that game even means anymore. But it matters. It's Michigan. It's the game. It's the rivalry, and they've lost a couple in a row. So I really don't see them losing this time. I mean, Jim's gone. Michigan's in a state of transition. Ohio State really beefed up the roster. They addressed a lot of things that they needed. The transfer portal has been really good to them. They've recruited their butt off. Like, it seems like they addressed the problem. It seems like they fixed what was missing. And I have a hard time. Like, they're my favorite to win it all. So I have a really, like, I think the Big Ten goes back to normal. Jim ran his race. Yep. Jim got his title. It was the most bizarre championship season ever because of the Connor Stallions thing, but it happened. They won. And Jim got out of there before anything could happen. And the NFL doesn't give a crap what happened with Connor Stallions. So in that respect, nothing's really, and the NCAA is weaker than ever. So nobody really thinks much will happen to Michigan. I just think, and I love Sharon Moore, and Sharon Moore is 1-0 against Ohio State. But I think the Buckeyes have addressed the issue significantly enough where I have a really hard time seeing them losing this year. So I think Ryan, yes, the pressure's there, but I think Ryan Day has addressed the problem. If he went into this season and the problem was still glaring, then I'd say he's screwed. Right. But I don't think he is, because I think they fixed the problem and then some. And once he wins a national title, any criticism of him is going to go down the drain. And think about how big of a deal that will be if Michigan and Ohio State go back to back. I mean, that would be a big deal for the Big Ten, because the Big Ten was kind of, lying in the weeds for a long time. What was weird about the Big Ten was making more money than anybody, but they weren't producing the results on the field. If they go back to back, it'll show you that things changed, that the NIL era has changed the SEC level of dominance.
Yeah, and I wish I had a ton of time, because you had some great perspective on the 12-team playoff, the Big Ten, and the SEC. But I want to ask you an off-topic question of sports here.
Sure.
You got this huge love for Disney, man. Mm-hmm. Every time I hear you talk about it all the time, I've heard you on different podcasts talk about it. Where'd the love for Disney come from?
I'm a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I'm weird in a lot of ways. I cover sports. But my loves are things like that. I love Broadway. Broadway is like my number one favorite thing to be a fan of and to obsess about, and go to New York and go visit and go to as many shows as I can over a couple of days. So that in itself is very non-traditional sports media guy. I just like to go, like, I love Disney parks. I love to go and kind of immerse myself into the childlike wonder of it all. Does it make me pathetic? Probably, but I like it. It's fun. And you know what? Such a place exists, so I'm going to take advantage of it. I really like the one in California too. I like going to Disneyland a lot, and that one's a lot of fun for all kinds of different reasons. But yeah, man, like I love it. I like to go as much as possible. And I just, yeah, I like to be a kid. I don't know why. I just, life's too stressful. So it's kind of fun to go and just lose yourself. I call it my golf. I don't really golf.
I was just gonna say that because
Yeah, it's
Coach
like
is the
my
big
golf.
golfer.
Yeah. That and when I go to musicals, that's another like kind of golf for me where I just lose myself in it and don't think about what's going on in the world. But I know it makes me unique, and I know it's not your typical sports media background when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Chris, who are some you mentioned some mentors early for you, when we first started the show. Who are some mentors that you've looked up to in this field, and are there still some guys today that you still talk to?
Yeah. So as far as sports is concerned, Kirk Herbstreit was a guy that I, really admired, and he's become a friend, which is cool. The fact that, I'll just get random texts from Kirk when he's listening to the radio
He's
show, I think
awesome.
is awesome. Yeah. It's pretty neat. A lot of people like that I grew up watching, whether it's Joe Tessitore or, Reese Davis or whoever, Laura Rutledge, all these people that have become, friends. They're people that are in my phone that I text with, that I have personal relationships with. That's cool. As far as people I looked up to, the radio show that I loved the most growing up was called Boers and Bernstein. It was a Chicago sports radio show. Boers retired, Terry Boers, but Dan Bernstein's still on the radio. And I listen to that a lot still. What's great about technology is you can actually like listen to local radio from other markets in your car now. So whenever Dan Bernstein's on, I like to listen to him because he really did inspire me. As far as my biggest influences, I will be truthful. My biggest influence is Howard Stern. Howard's interviewing ability, Howard's creativity, his immaturity. I think a lot of it really inspires me. I think his honesty with his audience inspires me because that's the one thing that I really don't hide anything. Because I'm not like I'm a nobody. I'm not important. So why would I have to, shield myself from anybody? And Howard's a lot bigger deal than me, but he's taken the same approach that he's kind of been an open book. And I always admired that. And I think it creates entertaining radio when you're not kind of locked into, these walls of trying to portray an image that you're not. To me, just being yourself, being who you are is the way to go. And I think Howard Stern and Terry Boers, who I mentioned a minute ago, were the two guys that really, taught me that was okay.
So, Chris, the last thing I was gonna ask, and you don't have to give your picks. I know you and Coach will probably pick the two final four games on probably Friday, I would think, right? You guys will
Yeah.
probably give your picks. Is of the 2-1 seeds for the men's side, who's more likely? I don't think either one of them fall. I'd love to see both NC State and Alabama win those games. I just think Purdue, Connecticut have been the two best teams all year round. Of those 2-1 seeds, which one do you think is more vulnerable this weekend?
I think Purdue. I don't see UConn losing. I see them just kind of, blowing their way out of this tournament over the next two games. Purdue, the reason I would say that is because there's a semi truck that plays in the middle of the paint for NC State. And that kid is big, man. Like DJ Burns is a big kid. And I think he might have this unique ability to put Zach Edey in foul trouble just with his girth and size. And it's not going to be Zach Edey just picking on somebody. This is going to be a big boy that's going to, take something to move. And I think that might present a unique matchup for Edey, even though Edey's 7'4" and has, big length on him. I think it could be a problem. I do. So I'll be interested to see if Matt Painter takes the bait and that's the matchup we get. Or if he just has him, parole the pain and not worry about DJ Burns and plays more of a zone kind of a thing. That could happen too, just to make sure that he doesn't get into foul trouble. But that to me is a question, because if Edey gets in foul trouble or for whatever reason fouls out, Purdue's in trouble, because Purdue make their living by Edey being 7'4" and then people collapsing on him or double teaming. And then guys are wide open to hit threes, and they are the most efficient team at doing that. they won't have those looks if there's no 7-4 on the floor. So I think that makes them more vulnerable. I don't think anything's vulnerable about UConn. I think UConn's just, they're a steamroll. They're just crushing people.
And we talked a little bit about the women's. I can't wait to watch Paige and Caitlin, that Iowa and Connecticut. I'm with you, though. I don't think anybody beats South Carolina. I'll be shocked if they don't win, the national championship again. But of Iowa or Connecticut, who do you think gives South Carolina the better game of those two?
Well, Caitlin's Caitlin, but I think UConn. I think UConn has better players across the board. I think they have better size inside. And that's what's going to matter against South Carolina. Not only are you going to have to really be efficient from shooting the basketball from the outside, whether it's Caitlin or Paige that's in that position, and they're going to have to be on point. You're going to have to deal with the size because they get a lot of – South Carolina might not be great on the first shot attempt, but they get a ton of second chance opportunities, and that's how they kill people. If you can rebound with them, you can beat them. So UConn, I think, would have a better shot to do that.
Well, Chris, man, listen, I could talk sports with you all night, but I won't keep you here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, for coming on and talking some sports with me, getting to learn a little bit more about you and Full Ride and everything. So I really can't thank you enough, my man.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate you asking me.
No problem. Keep up the good work and look forward to listening to you.
Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
So that was the show pony, Chris Childers. You could catch him and Coach Rick Neuheisel weekdays, Monday through Friday, 9 to 12 on SiriusXM Channel 84. He's on the College Sports Network. Chris is awesome. Really, he's probably, in my eyes, if you want to listen to somebody talk college football, college basketball, but from a different perspective, Chris is really good. And I've been hounding him for a long time to try to come on with me. And he's been so good to me. And I appreciate him taking the time tonight to come on with me. So Sunday, we'll be back at the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch. Next Wednesday night, the Glory Days podcast with my sister. We'll debut that show next Wednesday night. So I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. So I always say here on the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality. Have a good